The camera stays on you.
We'll call this meeting, the work session to order. The discussion item today is the 5-year projections that budget finance has done and Ron. I wanted to start out by saying thank you for the directors being here and council being able to attend even with Zoom. I would like to remind everybody that today's discussion is going to be eye-opening. It's going to be maybe a shock to some people. I would like to say that I don't look at, and I'll let Ron get into it here soon. I don't look at these projections as it's the end. I look at them as an opportunity to succeed. So with that being said, I would also like to point out that the time for pointing fingers and saying they should have did stuff different in the past, that's over. We're looking for solutions. We're looking for innovative ways to do business and to move forward and make Lebanon a viable, economically viable place to live and prosper and raise a family. So remember that. We're looking for solutions. We're not looking to point fingers at people. Okay, that time's passed. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. So as you are all aware, since last budget year, we've been running a structural deficit in the general fund and eating into in-fund balance year over year. We've been working on this issue since last fall, as you're aware of that as well, with different changes in departments, most of through just positions that we're not filling and whatnot throughout the course of the year. The purpose of today is to give you a 5-year projection so that you can look at that 5-year projection, what that looks like moving forward. And specifically, we're just talking about the general fund. We'll also provide you a little information as to what's causing that, what's causing the deficit, and then begin discussing options to fix it. What does that look like? There are some options. We'll go through that. I'll go through the options with you when we get to the end of Brandon's presentation on showing you through that. I expect that today's discussion is going to cause some anxiousness within our organization, probably with the community as well. Anytime you start talking about budget and deficits, it does that. So we are prepared for that as best as you can be prepared for that. So keep that in mind as you hear from community members, and we'll keep but this isn't a new issue. I think everybody's aware that we've been facing it. And originally we had intended to work through this summer, but as Brandon and I, mostly Brandon, I'll give him the credit for building the budget. We started looking at this and putting the 5-year projection together, and it came to a point where it's like, we need to act now. It's time now to take some action for the immediate future. What does that action look like? That's policy discussion that we're going to have with you all, and we'll just see where that lands. So with that, some of the causes of and let me caveat this too as well, and I think the mayor hit on this as well. It's not a sky is falling moment. There's a solution to this somewhere. We just need to dig into it and figure out what that looks like. A lot of it's going to depend on what services you want to keep and how you want to fund those services moving forward. What's important to the community as we navigate our way through this financial issue that we're in. So we're going to show you the 5-year projection here. Brandon can give you all the details in that, how we came up with that projection. Keep in mind, these numbers are the best that we have to date. It's fluid. It can change. You know, if we were, excuse me, a little bit out, I would say, you know, this is, you know, we'll probably make it through that. In this case, even if we're half wrong or half right, however you want to put it, we've still got a pretty big issue in front of us. So that's the reason that we've kind of expedited this. I want enough time for you all to be able to digest it, and for us as a team to come up with a good solution to navigate our way through it. So that's why we're pushing forward with this as we move forward. Some of the causes, obvious one, right? So expenditures are outpacing what our current revenue stream is, and that's mostly due to what our revenue stream is in the general fund. Property taxes and franchise fees, and there's a few other things that come in, state revenue sharing, but property taxes, you're limited to 3% year-over-year growth, and right now our personnel costs are running about 4.6%, when you start figuring in insurance and all the other things that are associated with that. Inflation over the last several years has been a big hit on not only our budgets, but everybody's budget. So, when you start looking at projects, like buying materials, buying vehicles, that's all covered into that. So we'll go through all those in the projection, and just what my goal of this for you guys would be to ask questions, provide input, give us some ideas. I think best for us to digest at this meeting and then come back in a separate meeting with maybe some direction that's provided today that we can give you some more, whatever that looks like, some more explicit detail of how to start the fix on this. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brandon, and please feel free to ask questions at any point. That's what this is for.
Thank you, Ron, Mr. Mayor, City Councilors. I organized this to kind of start with the revenue side of the equation. We'll walk through what we have in here, what the forecast looks like, and the parameters we're using. After that, we'll move into the expenditure side and get into we'll call it the meat and potatoes of what we're here for. So first, on the revenue side, this is kind of what we're looking at for our 5 years. So we have our 2025 budget that is, at this point, fairly locked in, and we don't anticipate any significant changes to these figures. And then the 4 years thereafter, making a total 5-year projection of where we expect things to go. A couple of items we want to hit. Our beginning balance, we expect at the beginning of 2025, we'll have about $4.6 million in our beginning fund balance. That is better than what our 2024 budget had for an ending fund balance, but as we know, throughout the course of a year, things do change. We have vacancy savings throughout the course of a year. Operations may change slightly to accommodate what's happening. So our fund balance projection is a little bit better than what we'd planned for initially. Property taxes. The 2025 budget includes a about $250,000 reduction in property tax revenue for next year. And part of that is because what our plan is at this point and what we're planning to bring to the budget committee is an idea where we have multiple urban renewal districts right now, and they reduce what property taxes can come into the general fund because they get a portion above kind of a frozen tax base that was initiated back when the URD was started. As a result, the biggest urban renewal district as far as property tax proceeds right now is the Northwest Urban Renewal District. That district right now all it's doing is paying off debt. And if everything continued as we planned, we would be paying off that debt through fiscal year 2023. We have a plan to accelerate those payments, 32, thank you.
I'm saying, man, we're gold.
We have a plan to accelerate those payments so that we can try to collapse that urban renewal district in time for the 2028 fiscal year. So looking at this forecast, you can see that we have a fairly modest property tax increase in our revenue lines. And then in 2028, you see this rather significant jump, almost an extra $1 million in tax revenue. That is at that point that Northwest URD being collapsed with the debt payments being taken care of. So that is included in this plan. It was one of the options as a method to try to bring in additional revenue to help this picture in some fashion. Overall, the bottom line is we're bringing in, at least for 2025, about $12.3 million. And by 2029, we expect that revenue generation would be about $14.2 million. We're looking at 4.7% average annual growth in our revenues across the next 5 years. On the expenditure side, this is where things, you get to see kind of the bigger picture. And some of this, I will tell you that some folks have already seen this number, or at least a different number before today. We've gotten some updated information that we were able to include in the presentation for this afternoon. So we'll walk through what that looks like. First is our salary line. So what we have built into this projection, the essentially $5.1 million in 2025, that assumes that all of our existing positions are filled for the entire fiscal year. So any vacancies that we have in the police department, as far as police officers are concerned, this picture assumes that all of those are filled, and that there would be no attrition or vacancies in the outlying years. It also includes an average of 4.64% growth in that salary line over each year over the next 5 years. That's kind of what the historical line has increased over time, and that includes cost of living adjustments, step increases for those that are eligible for those. So that's built into that 5.1 in 2025 and out to 6 million in 2029. We're going to get to PERS in just a minute. So Social Security and Medicare, those are, I mean, that's a standard rate. It's 6.2% for Social Security, 1.45% for Medicare. So that does not change, other than when salaries increase, so does that line. State taxes are fairly similar. There's not a lot of change in those year over year, but they are percentage based. So you'll see small adjustments in that. PERS, we have a whole separate slide to talk about PERS in just a minute. So I'm going to skip over that one. But you will probably notice there's some fairly significant jumps in those rates in the outlying years. Health insurance, we have budgeted a 6.5% annual growth. Again, historical trend over the past 10 years, that the medical premiums, medical, dental, vision, and our long-term disability insurance, those items have all increased about 6.5% a year. Now I say that, but for 2025, however, we have our insurance provider provides us with what they call a not to exceed, and they are telling us to plan for a 10% increase in the medical premiums for 2025. So each year ebbs and flows, but the average is about 6.5%. Other payroll expenses, again, primarily percentage based. So you'll see that with a slow increase year over year. In materials, we have budgeted a 1% increase in each of the fiscal years. That's not very much, and especially as Ron touched on the point of inflation and how that has hit us fairly significantly, along with many others. 1% isn't going to get us super far, but that's what we have planned, what we've put into this projection. You will notice a fairly sizable drop, the blue column being the 2025 fiscal year into 2026. We have a grant with, that's the CDBG grant, Community Development Block Grant, I think it is, planned for 2025. That's $300,000 for that budget line that we don't anticipate in 2026 unless we, for some reason, end up with that again. So that's the difference here and why there's such a steep drop. But each year after that is about a 1% increase. On the capital side, what we're doing with that is that's primarily vehicle replacements. And again, this is all just general fund. Okay, so primarily those vehicle replacements would be either in our parks, police department. I think those are the only two real places that have vehicles within the general fund at this point. So in 2025, we have police patrol vehicles. The number looks higher than we would normally have because ordering takes forever. So we have one vehicle on order right now that we don't anticipate getting in time for 2024 to end. So we're moving that to 25. The assumption is that we will be able to replace one vehicle a year
Brandon?
using that capital.
Just so I don't get to sixth grade math before I understand third grade math, can you explain to me, I missed something in the jump in materials and services from 2024 to 2025 and why it's going to come back down? I missed something in that math.
So the 2024 to 2025 is based on where folks think as far as projections. So one thing that is driving this increase between these 2 years is we're bringing parks into the general fund. Right now, what we're doing is transferring cash out equal to what they need over to a different fund. We're trying to kind of consolidate some things, eliminate some of those transfers to make it cleaner and easier to track. So that is one major driver for that materials and service increase from 24 to 25. And then, certainly our departments have been very frugal this year, understanding that there are financial constraints. And so we do have some savings in the material and service line over the course of this year. So that's driving the major increase. And then from 25 to 26, the only thing that's falling off is a $300,000 grant. And then you're getting the 1% increase that we have planned for.
Okay, thank you.
Further down this list, so debt service, one of the other ideas we came up with is the general fund pays about $127,000 a year in debt service. Again, trying to accelerate some of our debt payments to get rid of them as fast as possible so that we can free up cash each year. So our plan is to pay off that entire balance in 2025 and be done with what the general fund is paying, and then not have it for the outlying years. It doesn't save a ton of money. Overall, the actual savings is about 50 grand, but it is something, which is better than nothing. Transfers out. The transfers out are primarily to our internal service funds. So funds to cover city manager, council, finance, human resources, IT, custodial, and mechanic services. From 2024 to 2025, we do have a drop, and that's due to some of the cost reductions that we'll talk about in a future slide. And then we've got a 5% growth each year going out, assuming most of those areas outside in the internal service funds are personnel driven. And so you've got about a 5% increase each year. Pass-throughs, we get the same amount of money in on the revenue side as we do on the expenditure side. That's just us collecting and then paying out to a different government agency. So that's an in and out kind of thing. The appropriated contingency is a safety net, so to speak. So if something changes dramatically during the course of a year, we have a little flexibility to move things around. We also do budget for personnel contingencies. That could be cash outs from folks that may be departing, or if people you're allowed to take a vacation cash out during the course of a year. And so we plan for that in contingency in case we need to move it up into a specific department to comply with budget laws. All that being said, we have got an 8% increase in annual expenditures over the next 5 years. So when you couple that with a 4.7% increase on the revenue side, the math doesn't work. What we are showing, and this is kind of in this bottom line here, the second from the bottom, is approximately an average of $2 million that we are spending beyond what we are bringing in each year. And that's where we start to run into some significant problems. So our ending fund balance, as projected for the end of 2025, would be 2.7 million. That would be down to less than $1 million in 2026, just 2, unfortunately, very short fiscal years away. And then from then on out, you have a deficit fund balance. A deficit fund balance is not allowed per Oregon law. And so by the time we got there, if no changes were made, we would be forced to make changes. However, we're trying to put in where we are at today for some of these assumptions.
And keep in mind, this assumes a full staffing, right? This assumes that all positions are full, which year over year they never are. But the only way we can make this projection is to make that assumption. Without making that assumption, at some point you will have a year where that does happen, and you're going to be in a situation where you do not want to be. So that's just keep that in mind as we walk through that.
Over the last 10 years, the city has been, for the most part, adding to its fund balance, building that over time to get it to where it is at today. In 2012, we spent more than we brought in. And in 2019, think it was 2020. What's the other one? There were 2 years in that 10-year period in which we exceeded, we spent more than we brought in. And some of that's due to economic circumstances, right? There's some things that 2012 would have been property taxes not coming in where we had hoped for, certainly as the '08 housing crisis happened. But what I will say is that 2023 is the first year in which you started truly on a regular basis in this forecast, spending more than you are bringing in. So in this data, this column here in the kind of the middle of the left-hand side is 2023, and we spent about $100,000 more than we brought in. So that's the first time we truly crossed that threshold. So one of the primary drivers for some of this is PERS. PERS costs us a significant amount of money each year across our funds. This is not just a general fund issue. It certainly is one that hits all of the utilities and everything else as well. Right now, our rates are, we have a pension component, and then we pay a 6%, what they call pickup for the employee. So we pay 6% on the employee's behalf. So for those kind of the folks that have started in public service since 2003 and later, that's the OPSERP rate. That's sitting at about 18.9% for the pension rate, and then a 6% pickup. The PERS tier 1 and 2, so everybody who started before that 2003 date, we're paying 25.16% of their salary into the pension fund, plus that 6%. And then on the OPSERP side, there is also a separate rate for police and fire employees. And we have more to talk about here on that in just a second, as there were some changes that happened in this legislative session. But that rate is a little bit higher than just the standard OPSERP rate for general service employees. The rates include what they call a normal cost. So that's just, the pension amount, the assumption that we will pay out, of course, when somebody is off to retirement, and what we need to stockpile in order to support that retirement down the road. UAL is unfunded actuarial liability. And that is a number that I can't calculate for you, but that is a number that PERS hires a whole team of accountants to go through and figure out if everybody were to retire today and we needed to make 100% of the payments, how far behind are we? And so in their minds, we need to pay an additional 14% of each salary in order to make sure that we can fully fund the retirement program. Right now, PERS is sitting at about 80%, at least the last time we had heard, as far as what they are supposedly short, if everything had to be paid out today. The POB surplus, I've highlighted that for a specific reason, but right now long time ago, in the early 2000s, the city sold a pension obligation bond that essentially took a pot of cash and stashed it in the PERS fund to kind of offset the rate increases over the years. It is highlighted because the assumption right now, based on information from PERS, is that what they call a transition surplus, or that pot of money, is about to run out. Our debt payment for that ends in fiscal year 2028. And right now, we do not anticipate that pot of money will make it that far. So for 20 years, we've had this buy down, and that's about to fall off. And that's going to cost us another, basically, we'll say 4.5%, 4.6% that we are contributing of each person's salary that we have not been contributing before. That amounts to about $350,000 a year in extra expenditures on the general fund alone for us. So that is a major concern for us moving forward. The redirects is also a legislative action that happened several years ago, in which they are taking a portion of some of the 6% contributions and kind of redirecting that to help interest earnings. Each year, the PERS fund is based on the assumption that they will earn 6.8% of their total balance. 6.8% is a very hard target to hit. It used to be 6.9, and all they did was drop it 1/10%. But I can tell you 2 years ago, the fund lost 1.25%, and last year the fund only earned 5.8%. And so it accelerates that unfunded liability issue because they're not generating what they say they need to generate in order to make these numbers line out, which hurts us as a public entity. So going back to this, we have, as of this morning, we received what they assume will be our new PERS rates for the next biennium. So PERS sets rates on a 2-year cycle. The 2026 fiscal year is when that will begin. It begins in an even year and does an even odd. And so what we have programmed into this is a 27% increase on the PERS, on our PERS rates in 2026. So that is driving some of the issues that we are having. Is 27% is not a small number. And then we have the same assumption, 27% 2 years out from that, at which point we will finally cross that $2 million threshold in what we are paying to PERS out of the general fund each year, accelerating our problems. And that's not anything, unfortunately, that we can necessarily do an immediate action with. And what I mean by that is we can't just say we don't want to pay PERS that amount. That rate comes to us and that's what we pay. There are options as that obligation bond falls off potentially for us to look at the sale of another pension obligation bond. But one, rules have changed significantly in how that's done. And so it requires a detailed analysis that has to be farmed out to an actuarial to calculate over a 20-year period. It requires a significant public comment period and notice in order to allow for the community to have a say in that. And then also you run the risk of, okay, we put that money out there in PERS and you have to hope that over that 20-year lifespan, you get a buy down of your PERS rate equal to or more than what you are paying in the debt side. This one that we're about to end is slated to end 2 years, that buy down slated to end 2 years before we actually finish off the debt payments. And that's just, it's hard to project what 20 years from now looks like in the form of how much you're paying people and therefore what their contributions are going to look like and what their pension then will look like when they retire, what the market is going to do as far as how much they're going to be able to bring in. So there are a ton of variables in this that don't make it easy for us to just say, yep, we're going to shove a bunch of money over there and hope it works. It is something we are investigating, and we'll say, but it's not something that'll happen in a month's worth of time. The last thing that I want to add, so this is pretty much the same table, except we added 2 columns at the bottom. City policy, city financial policy is adopted by the council several years ago, requires that we hold a 17% reserve in our overall fund balance. So for example, in 2025, we are required to sit on an ending fund balance equal to about $1.7 million, almost 1.8, which means that really the flexibility we have is just under $1 million in that fund balance. We can't hold the necessary reserve amount in 2026 and still break even. So we're at a point now where there has to be some sort of changes in order for us to meet policy. And that could be, we look at that policy and decide we want to revise that. But given these figures, you maybe get some relief for the 2026 fiscal year, but $3 million deficit is going to cause a problem as far as you can't just wipe out your 17% reserve. Those reserve requirements impact what our debt rating is and therefore our interest rates. If we go out for future debt and we don't have some sort of reserve policy, then rating agencies and investors can look negatively upon that and decide that our debt is too risky. So there are some potential implications if we revise that policy.
As a lender, if somebody looked at us to give us debt, wouldn't they see this now and no matter what that reserve is and say, hey,
certainly
realistically?
If they're doing their homework, they're seeing the next 5 years, and yes, that's going to hurt us as it is. But at least, if they're looking at what do they have today, then, it's not as big of an issue in their minds. It depends, when we go through an evaluation process, our job is to provide them with the numbers to the best of our ability. And certainly we would give them everything we had. We don't generally, when you're doing a debt sale like that, you're not necessarily providing a 5-year forecast per se. But they are looking at your audits. They are looking at your current trends and trying to determine, is this a safe bet? And right now I would say they're going to look at this and think, we either need to increase that interest rate to ensure that we're going to get some return out of this, or it's not a safe bet and we don't want to invest. So there are some certainly long-term implications. They look at the general fund primarily because a lot of times when you are selling a bond, your general fund serves as kind of your backstop, right? So if you have a utility fund that you are selling, sometimes you can sell what they call a full faith and credit bond. And they think that if you can't make payments based on your revenue stream, say it's in a utility fund, if your utility revenue dried up suddenly, you can fall back to your general fund in order to make those payments. Well, they'll look at this and think, nope, that's not going to happen. So that really sets us on a different path. So at this point, what has been done? So we have made, as a department team and as a city, we've made some material and service reductions for 2024. That amounted to about $300,000 a year in reductions. For the coming year, we have in the 2025 budget a reduction of 8.6 FTE that directly and indirectly impacts the general fund. And what that means is there are some positions that dollar for dollar, if that position is gone, you're going to see that reduction in the general fund. But there are other positions, such as those that land in the internal service funds. The general fund only covers about 50% of that, and the other funds pay in the remaining. And so the general fund only sees 50% of the benefit. But we have reduced almost 9 FTE in positions that impacts that general fund. And then moving forward, as positions or as vacancies occur, then that is something that the city is going to have to evaluate. We're going to have to look at kind of the long-term implications. Is this something that is this, one, a legal requirement? And two, is this something that we can fund moving forward? Certainly we would not want to put somebody in a position where we're bringing them on and then something happens. So we will have to evaluate vacancies as they occur throughout the next several fiscal years. The next steps kind of look like this. So we, as a body, we really need to establish what our priorities look like moving forward. What is it that is essential in the minds of the council and the community? What is it that's important as far as funding is concerned? These are, at this point, policy and service decisions. Staff has gone through, and to their credit, put everything that they could on the table without dramatically changing the service structure of this organization. But we're at a point where there aren't additional changes that we can make without severely impacting services that you and the community have said are critical items. So we need your help and input on what that might look like moving forward. Lastly, additional expenditure reductions or alternative sources of funding are on the table at this point. Those are kind of, whichever way you slice it, one of those things or a mix of both has to occur in order for us to change the fact that we are dragging on that fund balance about $2 million a year. We don't have it, unfortunately. And so something structurally has to change for us in order to make that bottom line meet and to comply with state law. We could certainly make $2 million of reductions a year and hope that, the outlying years are going to make it. But I think what this projection shows is you are dragging on that fund balance kind of at an accelerated rate. Certainly you saw here in 2027, you're drawing almost $2.1 million off the fund balance. You're getting a little boost from the fact that the Northwest URD is falling off in 2028, and then you're continuing to climb again. So you can assume that the outlying years also have a similar problem without some structural changes. So That's a lot of information that I certainly threw at you. I'm happy to answer questions based on the data I've got in front of you. And we'll see where this goes.
Any
I'm
questions?
not good, but I won't ask any questions.
You're good for now? Online, Jeremy or Wayne, do you have any questions or comments?
Oh, I'm just amazed that we got to this point.
So, yeah, it looks like Jeremy fell off.
So we could discuss options if you don't have questions about where we're at there. And I think Brenda kind of alluded to it. I mean, basically you've got as an option substantial reduction in services, right? In order to make that up. What does that look like? I mean, there's 100 ways we can do it without getting into department specifics. You know, but that's a substantial reduction in service, right? So those are policy decisions. If you went with local option levy, that's an option. What does that include? It could, a variety of things. This is where we want to hear from you. I mean, Brandon and I have gone through and, well, we could do this, we could do that, we could do this. And really, we need that direction from you as policy setters so that we can give you the information you need to move that forward. We've looked at things like fee on the utility bill. That's an option. Several others I think that have been mentioned, local payroll tax, sales tax, restaurant tax. Those are less likely to get you what you need, and they're pretty cumbersome. One, we don't even know how we would collect that. Two, I'm not sure that that's going to get you what you need in terms of those. So really, you've got those three options up above, and you know, our goal is not to box you into a corner. Unfortunately, that's where we're at with these. So, like to hear from you on what you want us to pursue. What are your thoughts? What seems like a good attack on this?
Go ahead.
My feeling
Go ahead,
is
KJ.
that my feeling is that we do not reduce services because I think we're at a bottom line now. If we reduce services, it's going to affect everyone in the city. And I'm not sure that anybody's going to want to vote for that.
Well, I can agree with that sentiment. So, KJ, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I want to go back to that debt obligation bond on the PERS. I know that we need to, basically we used it to buy down points on the mortgage is what it amounts to. So, and I understand it's not something we can flip a switch and do again, but how long would it take to find out, look at renewing that bond?
Based on state law today, we estimate that would probably take anywhere between 6 and 9 months for us to do the full vet and process to
Okay,
determine
so
if that's a viable
We'll
solution.
still be in the problem zone when it gets done. So it'd probably be something that I would want to look at to find out if we can keep the PERS payment out of the general fund down.
Yeah. Is it, looks to me like we have a $2.2 million deficit between those 2 years, and 1.2 million of it basically is money we're gonna have to give to PERS. I never want to come, I know what PERS does, and I don't want to come off as the guy who says, oh, bad PERS, but that's a fixed expense we're gonna have to pay. And any way we can reduce that legally, I'm all for it. And if anything, services now, we need to increase our services, if anything, and I still want the jail to be open. I still want the best services our citizens can, and I understand that in the long run, that's going to make it more expensive for an average citizen to live in our town. That's the only math I can see that's going to do that. I don't think the state is going to step in. I mean, the state is managing this same PERS problem. They're not getting ahead in it. I don't think they're a resource to go to, as I understand it. So I would look to raising, I don't want to say the cost of living to get the services, but that's kind of what it equals out to me.
Well, the way I see it is we can't cut our way out of $2 million. It's just not something it's impossible. I mean, I don't want to know what that looks like because it would be wholesale just slashing of very important and critical departments for our city. I mean, we're at a point now where we really do have to look at revenue generating things, which is, I know, extremely unpopular, but, you know, a lot of our neighboring cities have a fee on utility bills. I know that's like things that we don't like talking about. I certainly don't like it. I pay the water bill too, guys. But, you know, looking at things like that, a local option levy, I know many of our neighboring cities have that for public safety, for example. That I think in some ways we're having this conversation, and I'm glad that we're having this conversation now, but also, you know, looking for direction from us, we really need to kind of set some of those policies in place or have those priorities in place before we start having those conversations. Does that make sense? So I know we talked about goal setting and,
Yes,
and
yes.
so what are our top 3 things? And then let's make sure that whatever those are as a body that we are moving forward with and making sure that those 3 pieces or whatever the number is are the most critical and essentially don't get touched and maybe even grown in some way, so.
No, well, we just, actually, Ron just brought it to me for a schedule for strategy goal setting. No, I agree with that. I totally agree with that, and it's kind of why we started that whole process was to figure out exactly what direction do we want the city to go. This is a little bit of a nudge that it's very important to make sure we know the strategy. You were going to say something?
It is a nudge, but also, I mean, we have some time. I'm not trying to say that,
No, no, you're-
that it's tomorrow,
Yeah,
but we do
exactly.
have a little bit of time. You know, I just want to point that out too.
I know that I've looked at the way other cities do business, and because you know, what we're possibly thinking of as solutions have already probably been done somewhere. That's a pretty fair statement, I think. So I know at Corvallis, if you look at their fee section, it's quite extensive for fees over there. And I think they probably went into that. I'm starting to come to the realization that Albany has the same fee structure. Michelle, actually, you sent a copy of that to me, which was pretty interesting. They do it by meter size for water. I think they came to the realization of with the cap on how much you can increase property values and tax revenues from that. They seen maybe the writing on the wall, or I'm not saying they're smarter in the city of Lebanon and the people that work here. I'm just saying that maybe they've seen it sooner. Okay. But I don't know if I really want to go. I will say this: if we do any type of like fees on the utility bill, I don't want to see it where it's a system like Corvallis or Albany's, that it's like very, not complex, but they got a fee on everything, you know, sidewalk fee, you know, walk down the sidewalk, you got to pay something. And, you know, it would be, and I don't know what it would look like. I know that public safety would possibly be one. I know that if what I've heard already about keeping all the services, which I agree with, I don't think we can slash to make this up. So that's why I said at the very beginning, we have to think of innovative ways of doing business in it, you know, in the city. The way we did it in the past doesn't work, especially with the increases of percentages of PERS and other, you know, just the economic inflation. So we have to figure out ways to do business as a smaller city. 20,000 doesn't sound small, but it is. New way to do business in the environment that we work in. We still have to adhere to laws and state mandates. So that's why I said what I said at the beginning. We have a lot of very intelligent people in this room with a lot of schooling and experience. And, you know, I will say this, I'm challenging everybody in this room to think of those new ways. Do I know what they look like? No. That's what I'm asking. So, it'd be easy for us to just go, oh, we'll just put a fee on this, and this on every bill and whatnot. But it's more complicated than that. We have to look at exactly how we would want to approach that. Did you have anything?
Well, part of the reason for your timing, yes, you do have time, but let's just walk down the road of an option levy at this point. So you know that Lebanon Fire is going out in May of this year. In order to get that on a ballot measure, in order to have good messaging and figure out what it is that you're going to levy and what it's going to take to do that is not going to happen overnight. So that was when we started looking at this, it was like, okay, we got to go now because what we don't want to do is just cram something through. So there is time, but it's not we shouldn't let the grass grow under our feet.
But
sure.
is it logical we might want to let the pain of the fire when passing die down a little before we put our hand out too?
It's possible.
mean-
Those are all,
Related to that timing, if I might, if that's the route that the city decides to go. So for example, if you're going to go out any November, whether it's this November or November the following year, we'll use November the following year, the council has to make decisions and solidify that and get it out the door in June in order to make the November ballot. And let's say that goes out in November 2026, your revenue generation doesn't start until November of 2027. So you are in the middle of that kind of next fiscal year and into the 2028 year. So the problem is the lead time associated. That's kind of why we decided to bring this to you now, is the lead time in some of those things, especially involving elections, is rather significant. And so it's something that we just have to work through as a group and figure out, which way does this want to go? Because, certainly if we're waiting until 2028, we have to figure something else out to at least survive 2027.
Before that. So just so I'm following that, if we decided June of this year, we could put it on November of this year's ballot.
You could.
But that's seems like it's rushing a little bit, but I could be wrong. But if it put on in 25, it wouldn't start generating income until the following year? Is that what you said? Or did I
Right,
miss it?
November of 26 at that point. Sorry, I think I said 27, but I meant November of 2026, which is the 2027 fiscal year.
Okay.
But again, I come back to that question of what will we be putting on the ballot if we don't know? I mean, we're not going to put general city operation, that I would have questions as a voter myself for something like that. So
Yeah, that's why
what?
doesn't feel
yeah.
realistic to get to June, to decide
Yeah,
this by June.
and we'll get into those. We'll give you some options on that. This is what you could do, and I'll just say it. This is what you could do if you did a law enforcement levy. This is what you could do if you did let's combine library, senior center, and parks into a levy or something to that effect. I'm not saying that any of those are the right ones or the wrong ones, but we can put some numbers together that help that, but we will need a consultant to probably help guide us through a portion of this and make sure we get the messaging correct to the community. Same thing with the utility fee. We're going to want a methodology that works, right? So that we can defend a method. We don't want to just arbitrarily pick a number out of the air and go, well, we're going to go with this. We want to have a methodology in place for how you charge residential, how you charge multi-unit residential, how you charge commercial, industrial, and so on. So that in and of itself will take a little bit of time too. The methodology for this is much simpler. We may be able to do some of that in-house and just come up with those numbers. But again, that's not going to happen overnight. So that's the reason for the, I guess the expedited coming sooner rather than later. So what would you like to see if we came back in April of this year, May of this year?
Okay, if I remember correctly, the largest portion of our budget comes out of Frank, about 60%.
Yes.
Okay, so if we went with a law enforcement levy to help relieve some of that, given compression, what would that look like to a household?
These are extremely preliminary figures based on
Just kind of a
assumptions.
swag.
If you are just trying to kind of fix the bottom line number, for example, You are looking at something in the ballpark of $200 a year in property tax revenue per kind of the average residential house in Lebanon right now.
That's including compression.
Yeah, that includes the
Okay.
compression.
So at least we know what it looks like when we start talking about it.
Well, I don't-
So
I
we
don't
have
wanna
an
be-
idea.
I don't want to be granular on it, but per household, what does that really mean? Does that, I mean, I'd want to know per tax-paying citizen, or I don't know how that math works. Per household, does that mean a household of 8 counts the same as a household of, or is that just the average?
It's based on property
per-
value.
Property value.
based on
Per
property value.
thousand,
Per
right?
property tax is
Yeah.
based on
So
per
you're
thousand.
talking about $1.70 something per thousand
Yeah.
on property value.
That's based on the average market value of a house in the city of Lebanon. And so
Vary
it'll
based
vary
on-
based on
On the value.
multiple,
Yeah.
multiple assumptions.
But how, and I've proven my ignorance on this kind of stuff lots. How does somebody paying rent contribute to that, or do they not? How does somebody who owns a apartment complex, is that calculated in that as well, or what's the variable there that I'm missing?
The owner of an apartment complex would pay into that.
Right,
The
yeah.
renters do not. no.
I
That's
get it.
figured, that's
Well,
figured
they
into
would
the rent.
figure
We
it
do
into
that
the
at
rent,
our
yeah.
place too. So when you figure how much do you have to charge, just to break even, property taxes per unit, it breaks out per unit is included in that. So the renters are actually paying property tax. They're just doing it through the
Their rent.
property owner.
Okay, I get it.
And that would be coming out of just property tax. What would it look like if we're putting a levy on like a utility bill?
That then depends entirely on what rate you set, what structure you have, does meter size play into that? We've been playing internally with some estimates that, you could potentially generate about $1 million with a fairly sizable fee.
But that would come from council, not from the voters.
Correct. That would be
So
a
that would be
council
something we just
action.
made the decision to do.
So we have about 6,500 accounts. If you did, let's just for rough numbers, and that without any methodology, if you just said $10 per, we'll call it account, which is meter, 650 plus your
If you have 6,500 accounts and a $10 fee and you just had it the same for everybody, you're looking at 650,000 a year.
more than that, 2 years. So you'd be 700 plus.
2 years.
You're thinking 10 months.
But that would be an apartment complex paying the same amount as a single-family home, right? If
Yes.
we're just using, yeah, okay.
Yes.
I just have one comment. If you did the levy, I mean, you're kind of betting on the come. How do you treat it between now and when you know the election result?
It depends on the timing. So, if for example, you went out sometime in a May vote, you start building the budget based on assumptions. You assume at that point that the levy would potentially pass. And then if it did not, then the council has the ability to reduce a budget without much policy or additional legwork. Per Oregon law, but adding to a budget after a levy's passed is significantly more difficult. So we'd shoot on the higher side and then revise if it did not pass.
Just order-wise, would it make sense to do some kind of, it sounds like the utility levy would be easier to get to than an operational one. Is that correct? Is that what I heard?
Utility fee is
Fees.
us.
Fee, excuse me.
Utility fee,
Yes.
Yeah, the fee
I mean,
is
if
done by the
we could
council.
enact something like that, and believe me, I know it wouldn't be popular at the gym. I got hit with why is our water bill so high just yesterday. But that would at least, I don't want to say buy us time, but it would offset some the time it would take to get to a operational levy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And this is just my 2 cents.
I'll give you $1.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I'm worth $1. I think you're probably looking at one or the other. I mean, really, if you want to do that. Now, the utility fee, so if you start thinking about $2 million and trying to capture that in a utility fee, let's just take our wastewater fund right now. I think it generates around $6 million a year. And then the average rate on a single-family home using 5 units is around $68 a month. So cut that in a third to get your 2 million. That's just doing some real rough math. That's a big number. So, the other things, you know, and we'll get into this in more detail, but the other things this does is, you know, people see that your utility bill as it's my water bill. Doesn't matter what it says on there or any of that stuff. So we got to be cognizant of that because there are projects in your utility funds that are coming up that you're going to have to do. So we'll walk through all those things with you. I think it's a viable solution. Not that we need to do it because all the cities around us are doing it, but that seems to be, you know, a way for cities to kind of continue on with the service that they've got, versus a lot of these cities have also got operating levies as well. So, and that's
just
not to say that we couldn't do both, but
Just logic, what doesn't preclude it from being both?
absolutely not.
You just think that that would be a harder, I don't want to say pill to swallow, but a harder sell?
I think if you put a utility fee out, the more of this that you do, and then you ask people, I think it's going to be a hard sell. I could be wrong, but,
I guess I know it's not a perfect world, it's just the citizens, our citizens have to know that what's going on in the world, it's happening in their own home.
Oh,
I
yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
I work in the collections department, they know what's going on.
Yeah.
If we can educate people full enough and say, hey, this is what it's gonna cost you, I'm not sure they're going to slice the water bill and the levy part. If you told me, hey, it's gonna cost you $400 a year
Yeah.
to have a better life, have a viable town with a funded police department and good utilities, I'm all in. I'll pay it right now.
And I'm not disagreeing with you on that at all. I think you could do both. My thing is, I just want us to think through all of the pros and cons of this before
I get it.
we take off on a path.
Question I would have is if you did do the levy, would we still need to be talking about a utility tax?
That would depend on the size of the levy
Right.
and associated compressions, right? We could certainly do some of that, I guess, initial construction of what that might look like and figuring out compression and such in-house.
I think that would be a good thing to have so that when we start making decisions, we have better information, more full information before we start throwing darts at the wall.
So when we come back from one of those meetings, that'll be one of the focus areas then
Yeah,
is,
I'd like to see those numbers.
Here's what I want to know too. I want to know, while I'm not interested in maybe charting the same path as other cities of our size, I want to know how they also fund, you know, do they have an operating levy for law enforcement? Do they have do they have utility fees for X, Y, or Z? And what are those, what are they, I guess, slated toward each time? I just want to get the idea if are we just behind the ball because we haven't done these things in the past, or and how other cities are doing this too. So something certainly for our neighbors, but also like-sized as well.
Sure.
So thank you.
Good point.
Okay. So would you guys prefer to do this in April, May? Do a second budget meeting or a second work session in May? I guess a lot of that depends on timing. What's your preference?
I would rather do it sooner than later.
Yeah,
We're going into budget season.
April.
Too.
I agree.
A second work session in April to go through this stuff. Would you prefer a night meeting, lunch meeting?
Depends on how much you want me to pay attention.
If we're looking at the,
I like noon on Wednesdays.
Okay.
I'm open either way on that one.
I could do noon on that Wednesday. I actually have a meeting that evening I can't miss.
What date did we say?
24th.
Yeah.
I assume.
Yep.
yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, well, we'll bring that back. I appreciate, I just want to say I appreciate you listening to us. It was kind of a panic moment for us a little bit. Not panic. We're going to get through it. We're going to find a solution. But we wanted to get this out in front of you as fast as we could. And again, it might change. It might get better. It's always got the potential to get worse. But you know, we're going with the best numbers that we have in front of us today. And I know Brandon's lost more hair going through all this stuff. So it's
Clock's
been a
ticking.
challenge. Yeah.
It's not much left.
Well, I don't picture it as panic. I picture it as you care, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you again for preparing us for this and for walking us slowly kind of through it and giving everybody a heads up. We appreciate it.
Yep, thank you.
Jeremy or Wayne, do you have anything to add?
No,
No, thank you.
Okay, like I said at the onset of this meeting is it's not a time to point fingers, it's time to come up with solutions. So please go home, take this information and think way outside that box because there's no, in my opinion, there's no dumb ideas. We need to hear every option that we possibly could do. And the reason why we do that is because there might be a nugget of your idea that fosters another idea that's even better. So, okay. If there's no other questions or comments, I will adjourn this meeting.
Ron, just for that
that?
date,
Oh, executive session.
the date for the 24th, I'm gonna have to confirm when I get back to my work calendar. I don't know of anything I can't, but